I still recall that electrifying moment, the first 100 words of a new chapter in my life, when everything I had built came crashing down with a single, disarming smile. I had poured every ounce of sweat and soul into growing my wife's father's company from a struggling venture into an $85 million powerhouse. In that shining moment of triumph, I believed I had finally earned the respect and recognition I'd long craved. Then, as if to punctuate my success with a final, cruel twist, her father leaned in with a gentle, unsettling smile and said, "Your wife's new husband will take over." In that instant, my world shattered, and I realized that loyalty and love were nothing more than illusions in a game of power. 4 years, I had dedicated myself to transforming a legacy that, in my eyes, was destined for greatness. When my wife's dad, an old-school businessman with a tough exterior and a hidden soft spot for his daughter, handed me the reins, I knew it was an opportunity one couldn't waste. I'd grown up with dreams of building something monumental, and when I first joined the company, it was little more than a struggling enterprise with potential. I worked day and night, innovating and strategizing, convinced that I could turn the tide. I introduced modern systems, revamped the outdated marketing strategy, and fostered a culture of innovation among a team that had once been mired in complacency. Slowly but surely, our revenue began to climb. Every small win felt like a personal triumph, a quiet affirmation that I was more than the sum of my humble beginnings. I remember the early days vividly, countless nights spent in the musty back office, coffee by my side, poring over spreadsheets and market trends. I was fueled by a determination that bordered on obsession, driven by the belief that I could transform our fortunes. My ideas were radical to some, but they resonated with others who saw the untapped potential in every neglected corner of the company. I forged alliances with talented, forward-thinking employees who shared my vision, and together we embarked on a relentless campaign of growth and reinvention. Clients who had once dismissed our products as outdated began to take notice, and slowly, the company's fortunes began to change. In time, our revenue soared to heights I had only dared to imagine. The board praised our progress, and every financial report painted a picture of a company reborn. I felt invincible, a man who had taken a legacy on the brink of collapse and turned it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I basked in the glory of success, my confidence swelling with every congratulatory nod and every eager handshake from investors who now saw us as a beacon of innovation in a stagnant industry. Yet, as my professional world reached its zenith, an insidious undercurrent began to stir in my personal life, one that would soon upend everything I had built. I had always assumed that my marriage, built on years of shared struggles and mutual support, was as solid as the foundation of the company. My wife had stood by me through thick and thin, her quiet encouragement a constant source of strength. We had weathered financial storms and celebrated hard-won victories side by side, and I believed that our love was a partnership that could overcome any obstacle. But as the company's success grew, so did subtle fissures in our relationship. I began to notice small changes in her behavior, a distant look, a hesitancy in her voice when discussing the future, and moments when she would catch my eye and quickly look away. I brushed them off as the inevitable strain of living in a high-pressure world. I never suspected that beneath the veneer of marital bliss, a secret betrayal was unfolding. It was on a crisp spring afternoon, just as the company was celebrating yet another record-breaking quarter, that everything came crashing down. I had been reviewing the latest financial reports in my office, a sunlit room filled with the hum of productivity and the promise of a bright future, when I received a phone call that I would later describe as the most devastating moment of my life. The call came from my father-in-law, a man I had always respected and trusted. His voice, usually so measured and encouraging, carried an unfamiliar tone of amusement. "Congratulations on growing the company to $85 million, he began, and I felt a flicker of pride. But before I could respond, he continued with a disarming smile in his voice, "By the way, your wife's new husband will take over." His words, delivered with an unsettling mix of pride and mirth, hit me like a physical blow. I was stunned. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what he had just said. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity, before he finally replied, "It's simple. Your wife has made her choice, and as a result, I'm handing over the control of the company. Consider it a new beginning for all of us." I could hardly process the enormity of the betrayal. Not only had my wife chosen someone else over our marriage, but my father-in-law had now decided that my contributions, my hard work, were rendered meaningless by her infidelity. In that moment, a searing mix of emotions surged within me. I felt the sting of humiliation, the weight of shattered dreams, and the burning embers of anger that demanded retribution. Everything I had built, every sleepless night, every ounce of sacrifice, seemed to have been wiped away with a dismissive, mocking laugh. I was left standing at the precipice of a new reality, one where the love and loyalty I had invested in my marriage were repaid with betrayal, and my professional triumphs were overshadowed by a personal disgrace that I never saw coming. As the call ended, I sat in stunned silence, the room spinning around me. I felt as if the ground beneath my feet had given way, leaving me suspended in a void of anger and despair. My mind was a whirlwind of memories, of the countless nights I had stayed up, driven by the belief that our love was unbreakable, of the long hours at the office, the painstaking efforts to elevate the company to heights we'd never imagined. And now, all of that seemed to be crumbling in an instant. I felt betrayed by the woman I loved, and worse, by the man I had once looked up to as a mentor and a father figure. In the days that followed, I grappled with this profound sense of betrayal. I revisited every conversation, every subtle sign that perhaps I had been blind to the truth all along. The image of my wife laughing with her new lover on the sunny shores of Hawaii was a constant, agonizing presence, a stark reminder that while I had labored to build a future for us, she had chosen a different path. My father-in-law's callous declaration was not merely a business decision, it was a public, devastating repudiation of everything I had strived for, both personally and professionally. I found myself retreating into isolation, the once vibrant corridors of my mind now echoing with the hollow sound of shattered dreams. I spent long hours in my study, pouring my heart into my journal, scribbling out every raw emotion, every bitter thought. Each word was a plea for understanding, a desperate attempt to make sense of the injustice that had upended my world. I wrote about the loss of my wife's trust, the betrayal of my father-in-law's unexpected decree, and the unbearable weight of a future that now seemed dictated by someone else's whims. I questioned whether I had been naive, whether I had placed my faith in a love that was never truly there. Every page of my journal was a testament to my inner turmoil, a chronicle of the intense, conflicting emotions that surged within me, grief, anger, humiliation, and a spark of defiance that, despite it all, refused to be extinguished. In the midst of this inner tempest, I realized that I had two choices: to allow the betrayal to break me entirely or to harness the pain as a catalyst for a new beginning. The memory of that fateful phone call, the echo of my father-in-law's dismissive laughter, became the fuel for a burning resolve. I decided that I would not be defined by the betrayal, but rather by the strength I would summon to overcome it. I began to research legal avenues and financial strategies to salvage what was left of my investments, determined to protect the legacy I had worked so tirelessly to build. I sought counsel from trusted advisors, reconnected with old colleagues, and slowly, painstakingly, began to lay the groundwork for a future that was unequivocally my own. One night, as I walked alone through the rain-soaked streets, the cool droplets mingling with my tears, I made a silent vow: I would reclaim my worth, no matter the cost. I promised myself that I would rise from this abyss of betrayal and build a new legacy, not one defined by the shallow judgments of others, but by the indomitable spirit within me. I envisioned a future where my hard work, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment would not be in vain, where every setback was a stepping stone to a triumphant comeback. With every small step I took, whether it was a quiet conversation with a mentor, a long session of planning and strategizing, or simply a moment of introspection under the starry night, I felt the seeds of renewal take root within me. I began to see that the harshness of the past did not have to dictate my future. Instead, it could be the very force that propelled me to redefine my identity, to challenge the status quo, and to create a life that was built on my own terms. I knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but I also knew that I had discovered a strength within me that could not be diminished by anyone's mockery or betrayal. And so, as I stand on the threshold of that uncertain future, I am filled with a quiet determination, a resolve to transform every bitter memory into a stepping stone toward a new beginning. I will rebuild my life, not as a man defined by betrayal and loss, but as one who has turned those dark chapters into the foundation of an unyielding legacy. My journey, though marred by the cruelty of those who once loved me, is far from over. Instead, it is the start of a new era, a time to reclaim my worth, to rebuild with purpose, and to prove that even in the depths of despair, hope can flourish. In the suffocating aftermath of that impossible day, every moment felt like a cruel punishment. I was still at the funeral, a stark, grim setting where every whispered condolence and downcast gaze only deepened the void within me. The cold stone of my son's grave bore silent witness to the future I'd once dreamed of, a future where he would laugh, learn, and grow into the man I always hoped he could be. Now, that future was gone, and even more excruciatingly, I was forced to endure the knowledge that while I grieved alone in a world of sorrow and disbelief, my wife was laughing it off in a tropical paradise with her lover. 4 days afterward, I wandered through a haze of despair, unable to reconcile the contradictory realities that collided within me. Each morning, I awoke with the memory of my son's gentle, haunting question echoing in my ears, "Daddy, why did Mommy do that?" It was as if that innocent inquiry held the weight of every hope and promise I had ever made to him, now splintered into 1,000 shards. I spent long, agonizing hours alone in the confines of our small, dimly lit apartment, sitting motionless by the window as the world outside carried on indifferently. The rain would fall relentlessly against the glass, each droplet a bitter reminder of the tears I refused to shed in public. In those long, torturous days, I tried to drown myself in memories. I replayed every moment that led to this catastrophic betrayal, the whispered secrets over late-night phone calls, the subtle changes in her tone when I asked about her plans, and the furtive glances she exchanged with that unknown man. I had always trusted her, believed in our bond, and built a life on the promise of unconditional love. Now, all of that felt like a cruel mirage. The house, once our shared sanctuary, seemed to echo with hollow laughter that mocked me in silence. Unable to bear the suffocating weight of isolation and despair, I turned to my journal, a worn, leather-bound notebook that had witnessed happier times and, now, held the burden of my grief. I wrote feverishly, every word a catharsis for the hurt and a desperate plea for understanding. I detailed the countless sacrifices I had made to build a secure future for my son, the extra shifts at work, the late nights poring over bills, the dreams of a bright education that I had so carefully planned. Now, all that hope was vanishing, swept away by a single act of betrayal. With each scribbled line, I questioned the fairness of life and my own worth. I wondered how someone who claimed to love me could so easily cast me aside and leave me to face this nightmare alone. As I delved deeper into my sorrow, a bitter clarity began to emerge. I realized that while the pain was almost too much to bear, it was also a wake-up call, a moment that demanded I no longer allow myself to be defined by the cruelty of others. I knew I had to act, not just to honor the memory of my son, but to reclaim my self-respect and to forge a future on my own terms. The idea of revenge was not something I embraced lightly, but in the darkest recesses of my despair, I felt a stirring resolve, a fire that refused to be extinguished by her thoughtless actions. In those desperate moments, I reached out to a few trusted friends, people who had seen me at my lowest and never hesitated to remind me of my inherent worth. Late at night, over cups of strong coffee in a nearly deserted diner, I confided my turmoil to Mark, a longtime friend with a steady voice and empathetic eyes. "You've got to fight for what you deserve," he said, his words a lifeline in that sea of grief. "I know it hurts, but this isn't just about the money or the betrayal, it's about reclaiming your future and showing the world that you're not defined by someone else's selfish choices." His words struck a chord deep within me, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of determination amid the darkness. Emboldened by the support of those who cared, I began to piece together a plan, a way to take control of my future and, in some small way, to counter the injustice that had upended my life. I started by re-evaluating every aspect of my finances. I met with a financial advisor, someone who was blunt yet compassionate, to review the extensive damage done by my wife's reckless actions. Every line on the bank statements and every percentage point of our lost savings was a stark, cold reminder of what we had sacrificed for our son's future, a future that now seemed as uncertain as the next passing day. With measured determination, I drafted a new saving strategy, exploring alternative funding options, scholarships, and even the possibility of community support to rebuild a safety net for my son's education. Every small step in that direction was a victory, a silent defiance against the betrayal that had stolen so much from us. Parallel to the financial battle, I sought solace in therapy. I began attending sessions with Dr. Ramirez, a compassionate therapist who specialized in family betrayal and deep-seated grief. In our sessions, I poured out my heart, the raw, unfiltered emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. "It's not about forgetting or excusing," Dr. Ramirez would say gently, "it's about understanding that your pain does not diminish your worth. You are still enough, even if those who are supposed to love you see you as a disappointment." Her words slowly began to chip away at the fortress of bitterness that had taken root in my soul. I learned that healing was not a linear process, but a series of small, deliberate steps, a gradual unburdening of the weight that had held me captive. With each session, I started to reclaim a sense of self that had been buried beneath layers of despair. In the midst of this emotional recovery, the relentless pressure to build a new future for my son drove me to immerse myself in work. I dove into my professional projects with a renewed intensity, channeling my grief and anger into creativity and innovation. Every meeting, every decision I made, was now a statement of defiance against the notion that I was worthless. Colleagues began to notice the change, a quiet, steely determination that came from within. I took on extra responsibilities, pushed for innovative ideas, and slowly, the company began to acknowledge that my contributions were more than the sum of my struggles. Each small success at work was a reminder that I was capable of building something remarkable, even in the face of personal heartbreak. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that I couldn't keep my emotions bottled up forever. One rainy evening, I attended a small support group meeting for parents who had faced profound familial betrayal. In that circle of strangers, each with their own story of loss, betrayal, and quiet resilience, I found a sense of community that was both healing and empowering. I listened as others recounted their own journeys through darkness and emerged with a flicker of hope. One man, his voice steady despite the pain, told me, "Our scars are not a sign of defeat, they are proof that we've survived the worst and that we have the strength to rebuild." Those words resonated deeply, affirming that even though the wounds of that tragic day were raw, they could one day become the foundation for a brighter future. I left that meeting with a newfound clarity. I realized that the path ahead wasn't solely about recovering what was lost, it was about building something new, an identity defined not by the betrayal of my wife or the indifference of those who should have cared, but by the resilience and determination that had grown within me in the darkest hours. I made a silent promise that I would rebuild, not for revenge, but for the love of my son and for the sake of my own self-respect. I vowed to create a future where every setback was a lesson, every tear was a stepping stone, and every moment of pain was transformed into a testament of survival. In the solitude of my apartment, I began to write again, not just to vent, but to plan. I drafted letters to myself, outlined new goals, and even started sketching ideas for small business ventures that could stabilize our financial future. My thoughts turned to my son, whose innocent eyes had seen too much sorrow too soon. I imagined a world where he could grow up without the burden of our past, a world where his education, his dreams, and his laughter were nurtured, regardless of the failures of those who were supposed to love him. Every plan I made, every small step toward rebuilding our financial security, was imbued with the fierce, unyielding desire to honor his future. In that turbulent crucible of grief and determination, I began to understand that my journey was not just about overcoming betrayal, it was about reclaiming my identity, finding strength in the depths of despair, and proving to myself that I was worth every sacrifice. The wounds of that day would never fully fade, but I could choose to let them be the fuel that propelled me forward, rather than the chains that held me back. And so, as I stand at the crossroads of my shattered past and a future I am painstakingly building, I carry with me the painful lessons of betrayal and the quiet power of hope. Every day, I rise with a renewed sense of purpose, to rebuild our lives, to restore the dreams that were stolen, and to transform the sorrow of that fateful day into a legacy of strength, resilience, and unwavering self-worth. My son's memory, his dreams, and the promise I made to him now guide every decision, every small victory, and every long, solitary night of reflection. I have learned that true strength isn't defined by the absence of pain, but by the courage to rise above it, to rebuild, and to create a future where my worth is measured solely by my own vision. With every step I take, I am reminded that although the journey is fraught with challenges, it is also a path toward redemption. I will continue to fight for a future that honors my son's memory and reclaims my dignity. The road ahead may be long and uncertain, but I am no longer defined by the betrayal that once nearly broke me. Instead, I have turned that pain into a foundation upon which I will build a legacy of resilience, love, and hope. I woke that morning with a chill that wasn't from the early dawn but from the cold clarity that had settled in my soul. Every fiber of my being vibrated with the intensity of what had just transpired, a day that marked the end of a toxic chapter and the start of an uncharted journey toward reclaiming my worth. The memory of my wife's relentless mockery, "You're jobless, you're worthless," had tormented me for years, slowly eroding the pride I once held dear. And then, with surgical precision, I'd fired her and her cronies, those sycophantic friends who had slithered into every corner of my company. In that electrifying moment, as I delivered the final blow to our shared illusions, I felt an overwhelming mix of vindication and bitter sorrow. I knew that while I had severed ties with a poisonous past, the road to rebuilding my life, and my self-respect, was just beginning. After the storm of that fateful day, I found myself in a period of profound solitude, a time when every hour stretched out as I sat alone in my quiet office, surrounded by the stark hum of computers and the silent testimony of empty cubicles. I couldn't help but replay each moment, the echo of her laughter, the dismissive tone that had once made me doubt my worth, and the unwavering determination that had driven me to reclaim control of my life. I pored over every detail of the company's finances, every project that I had poured my sweat into, as if to remind myself that my value was not defined by her scorn but by the vision and relentless effort I had invested in every corner of this business. I began to channel that raw anger and betrayal into building a new future. Late into countless nights, I refined my strategic plans and sought counsel from trusted mentors, old friends who believed in me even when I doubted myself. They reminded me that true leadership isn't about placating those who criticize you. It's about turning every setback into a launching pad for a comeback. You've got the talent and the vision, one of them said, now show the world you're more than the sum of their insults. With that, I began to redefine the culture of the company. I initiated sweeping changes, modernizing our systems, restructuring teams, and fostering an environment where every idea was valued, regardless of its origin. The very air in the office began to change. Where once there had been tension and fear, now there was a tangible sense of possibility. My new strategy wasn't just about turning profits, it was about building a legacy rooted in integrity, innovation, and the recognition of every employee's worth. Yet, amid the professional triumphs, the personal wounds still throbbed. I found myself haunted by memories of our life together, of moments when I believed in our shared dreams, only to have them shattered by a single, venomous remark. I recalled the times when she would roll her eyes as I struggled with unemployment, when her laughter at my expense became a constant refrain that reverberated through my heart. There were nights when I'd lie awake, questioning how deeply I had ever known her, and wondering if love, as I had understood it, was merely an illusion. My anger simmered beneath the surface, fueling a fierce desire not only to succeed but to prove that I was more than what she had labeled me. In the wake of firing her and her friends, I received a mixed response. Some called it bold, others, reckless. The fallout rippled through both my personal life and the company. My estranged wife tried to spin the narrative in her favor, but the truth was undeniable, the change was inevitable, and it was coming from me. I made it my mission to let every board meeting, every client presentation, and every new project be a testament to the man I had become, a man who would not be defined by the dismissals and mockery of the past. I embraced new challenges with a fervor that surprised even me, taking calculated risks, and pushing the boundaries of what my company could achieve. Slowly, the profits began to soar, and the culture transformed. The employees, once cowed by an oppressive atmosphere, now thrived in a climate of respect and creative freedom. Each success felt like a small victory, a quiet triumph against every sneer that had once told me I was nothing. But with every professional milestone, I knew the personal cost would remain. The scars of her derision, the sting of those hurtful words, would always be a part of me. I learned to accept that pain, not as a burden, but as a reminder of my journey. In therapy, I delved deep into these wounds, unraveling the threads of self-doubt and learning that forgiveness is not an erasure of the past but a way to free oneself from its shackles. I discovered that I could let go of the bitterness without forgetting the lessons it had taught me. My transformation was not about revenge alone, it was about reclaiming my dignity and affirming that I was, and always had been, worthy of respect and success. In the quiet moments of reflection, I found solace in creative pursuits. I returned to writing, capturing my tumultuous emotions in essays and poetry that resonated with those who, like me, had faced rejection and betrayal. My words became a mirror for others, an invitation to see that pain, when embraced and transformed, could be the foundation for a future reimagined. I even began to share my story at industry conferences, not to boast, but to inspire others to find their strength in adversity. With every narrative, I channeled the memory of those dismissive words into a call for resilience and hope. One particularly moving evening, after a long day of business triumphs and personal breakthroughs, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my modest apartment, looking out at the city lights that flickered like tiny promises of a new tomorrow. My thoughts drifted to the past, the endless nights of hard work, the mocking laughter that once cut through me, and the painful moment when everything I had built seemed to crumble. And yet, in that quiet solitude, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey. I had transformed the agony of betrayal into a wellspring of strength, and with every new day, I was forging a future that honored not just my professional achievements but the quiet, unyielding love I held for my own self-worth. I resolved that my legacy would not be defined by the shallow judgments of my estranged wife or the dismissive words of those who had doubted me. Instead, it would be built on every challenge overcome, every risk taken, and every small victory won in the battle for my dignity. I vowed to create a company that wasn't just profitable, but that valued every individual's contribution and fostered a culture of innovation and mutual respect. I also pledged to be a better man, a father, a leader, and a human being who would never allow someone else's narrow view to diminish the light within him. As I prepared to face the future head-on, I began to write a final journal entry, a declaration of my rebirth. I recounted the long, painful path that had led me from the depths of despair to this moment of resolute determination. I wrote about how every harsh word, every moment of rejection, had forged a part of my identity, a reminder that I was not defined by my failures, but by my relentless drive to rise above them. I wrote of my vision for the company, my plans to innovate, and my unwavering commitment to prove that my worth was immeasurable. Most importantly, I wrote of my promise to my own soul, to never again allow someone else's cruelty to dictate the course of my life. Now, as I look to the horizon, the future is a mosaic of uncertainty and promise. I know there will be battles yet to fight, challenges that will test the very limits of my resolve. But I also know that I have emerged from the crucible of betrayal as a stronger, wiser man, a man who has learned that true power lies in the courage to forge one's own path, regardless of the obstacles. Every step I take, every decision I make, is a testament to the truth that I am worth more than the harsh words of the past. I am building a legacy not defined by revenge, but by resilience, innovation, and the unwavering belief that every setback is the foundation for a magnificent comeback. With my heart still carrying the echoes of painful memories but also alight with the fires of newfound purpose, I step into tomorrow with a clear vision, to lead, to inspire, and to create a future where my worth is celebrated on my own terms. I am no longer the man who was once ridiculed and cast aside. I am a visionary, a leader, and above all, a man who has reclaimed his destiny through the power of resilience and self-belief. And as the sun rises on this new day, I embrace the promise of tomorrow, a tomorrow where every scar is a badge of honor, and every challenge is a stepping stone to greatness. One particularly moving evening, after a long day of business triumphs and personal breakthroughs, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my modest apartment, looking out at the city lights that flickered like tiny promises of a new tomorrow. My thoughts drifted to the past, the endless nights of hard work, the mocking laughter that once cut through me, and the painful moment when everything I had built seemed to crumble. And yet, in that quiet solitude, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey. I had transformed the agony of betrayal into a wellspring of strength, and with every new day, I was forging a future that honored not just my professional achievements but the quiet, unyielding love I held for my own self-worth. I resolved that my legacy would not be defined by the shallow judgments of my estranged wife or the dismissive words of those who had doubted me. Instead, it would be built on every challenge overcome, every risk taken, and every small victory won in the battle for my dignity. I vowed to create a company that wasn't just profitable, but that valued every individual's contribution and fostered a culture of innovation and mutual respect. I also pledged to be a better man, a father, a leader, and a human being who would never allow someone else's narrow view to diminish the light within him. As I prepared to face the future head-on, I began to write a final journal entry, a declaration of my rebirth. I recounted the long, painful path that had led me from the depths of despair to this moment of resolute determination. I wrote about how every harsh word, every moment of rejection, had forged a part of my identity, a reminder that I was not defined by my failures, but by my relentless drive to rise above them. I wrote of my vision for the company, my plans to innovate, and my unwavering commitment to prove that my worth was immeasurable. Most importantly, I wrote of my promise to my own soul, to never again allow someone else's cruelty to dictate the course of my life. Now, as I look to the horizon, the future is a mosaic of uncertainty and promise. I know there will be battles yet to fight, challenges that will test the very limits of my resolve. But I also know that I have emerged from the crucible of betrayal as a stronger, wiser man, a man who has learned that true power lies in the courage to forge one's own path, regardless of the obstacles. Every step I take, every decision I make, is a testament to the truth that I am worth more than the harsh words of the past. I am building a legacy not defined by revenge, but by resilience, innovation, and the unwavering belief that every setback is the foundation for a magnificent comeback. With my heart still carrying the echoes of painful memories but also alight with the fires of newfound purpose, I step into tomorrow with a clear vision, to lead, to inspire, and to create a future where my worth is celebrated on my own terms. I am no longer the man who was once ridiculed and cast aside. I am a visionary, a leader, and above all, a man who has reclaimed his destiny through the power of resilience and self-belief. And as the sun rises on this new day, I embrace the promise of tomorrow, a tomorrow where every scar is a badge of honor, and every challenge is a stepping stone to greatness.